There is a sound that nobody warns you about. It is the sound your house makes at 7 in the evening when there is no one in it but you. You know the sound I mean. It is not silence, exactly. Silence would be peaceful. This is something else. It is the refrigerator humming into rooms that used to hold voices. It is the clock on the wall, which you never once heard for 30 years, suddenly ticking so loud it feels like it is counting something. It is the creak of a floor that nobody is walking on. The house is not quiet. The house is empty. And empty has a sound. And you have been living inside that sound, some of you for years, and it is doing something to you that you have not been able to name. You tell people you are fine. You tell your children the house is too big, but you manage. You keep the television on from morning to night, not because you are watching it, but because it argues with the emptiness so you don't have to. And every evening, around the same hour, the wait arrives. The hour when the house used to fill up, the door that used to open, the noise that used to come home. Today I am going to break down why the empty house makes people miserable. The real reasons, not the obvious ones. And then I am going to tell you what my people knew about empty dwellings and full ones, because the old way has an answer here that the modern world has completely forgotten. And the answer is not what you think. It is not get a roommate. It is not move somewhere smaller. It is something you can begin tonight, in the same house, without changing your address at all. Let me start with why it hurts, because the why matters more than you think. The modern world believes the empty house is a loneliness problem, and loneliness is part of it, but it is not the deepest part. The deepest part is this. Your house is not a building. Your house is a museum of a life that ended, and you are the only visitor. Walk through it honestly and you will see what I mean. That is not a kitchen table. That is the place where 4 people ate 10,000 dinners, where homework was argued over, where news was delivered, good and terrible, where a family did its living. That is not a hallway. That is where the noise came from, the running feet, the slammed doors, the shouted names. That is not a spare bedroom. That is a room that still has a name. You know its name. You say it without thinking. That's Michael's room. Michael has not lived there in 25 years. Michael has gray hair now. But the room keeps his name like a headstone keeps a name. And every single day you walk through this museum, past exhibit after exhibit of a life that was loud and full and needed you. And the museum does what museums do. It preserves. It reminds. It keeps the past perfectly displayed and perfectly out of reach. And you wonder why the house makes you heavy. A person cannot live inside a monument to their former life and feel light. It is not possible. The house is not just empty of people, it is full of ghosts. And ghosts, my grandmother used to say, are not the spirits of the dead. Most ghosts are the spirits of moments, the dinner that will never happen again, the voice that will never call down those stairs again. You live in a haunted house. Everyone your age does. And nobody talks about it. And there is a second reason the empty house crushes people. And this one is about you, not the rooms. For 30 or 40 years, that house gave you a job. The house was full, and full houses demand things. Meals had to appear. Laundry had to move. Noise had to be managed. Schedules had to be run. People had to be gathered and fed and patched up and sent out again. You were not just living in the house, you were running it. It was a small nation, and you were its government. And then, one person at a time, the nation emptied. And nobody officially fired you, but the job disappeared. And now you wake up in the same building where you once ran a whole world, and the building needs almost nothing from you. Wipe a counter that is already clean. cook for one, which barely counts as cooking. The house that once demanded everything now demands nothing. And the person who was shaped by decades of being demanded of stands in the middle of all that nothing and feels themselves begin to disappear. Because if the house doesn't need you, and no one in it calls your name, then the question creeps in through the quiet. The question every person in an empty house eventually hears: what am I for now? That question is the real weight. The silence is just the room the question lives in. I knew a woman who could tell you the exact hour her house hurt the most. 10 minutes to 6. For 31 years, 10 minutes to 6 was when she started watching for headlights. Her husband's truck came down the road at 6, give or take, for 31 years. The dinner would be close to ready. The table would be set. And at 10 minutes to 6, some part of her, whatever she was doing, would begin to listen for the truck. She did not even know she did it until he was gone. And then she knew. Because he passed, and the truck never came again, and her body kept the appointment anyway. Every evening, 10 minutes to 6, 31 years of habit turned to face a road with nothing on it. She told me it was the cruelest 10 minutes of every day, not the nights, not the mornings. 10 minutes to 6. Because that is the truth about the empty house that nobody understands until they live in one. The house is not uniformly empty. The emptiness has a schedule. It arrives at the hours when the fullness used to arrive. The hour the bus used to drop the children. The hour the door used to open. The hour the phone used to ring every Sunday. Your body learned those hours over decades, and your body has not unlearned them. And it stands at those windows every day, waiting for a fullness that has moved away. You are not imagining that some hours are heavier than others. You are keeping appointments with the past. And part of what I am going to teach you today is how to give those hours new appointments. Because the hour itself is innocent. 10 minutes to 6 can learn to hold something new, but someone has to teach it. Before I share the next teaching, I need to tell you something. I am not going to be here forever, and most of what I know was never written anywhere. So I sat down and I wrote it. All of it. 20 teachings, 4 parts, in the order they were meant to be received. The ones about what a dwelling is actually for. The ones about filling a house with life again, starting from one chair. The ones I have never said on camera. It is called The Native Way, and it costs less than one dinner you will not remember. Scan the code on your screen or look in the comments, but do not leave yet. Because what I am about to tell you next is what my people understood about houses that the modern world has completely lost, and it changes everything about those quiet rooms. Now let me tell you what the old way knew. In my people's understanding, a dwelling was never a container for possessions. A dwelling was a living thing, and like every living thing, it needed to breathe. And a dwelling breathes through what happens inside it. Fire happening, food happening, voices happening, making happening, prayer happening. A dwelling with life moving through it is alive, and everyone who steps into it can feel that aliveness, the way you have felt it in certain homes your whole life. You know those homes. You walk in and something in your shoulders drops. And you have felt the opposite too. Houses that were expensive and spotless and dead. The old people would say the difference is simple. One house is breathing, the other stopped. And here is the teaching that matters for you. The house stops breathing when the life stops moving through it. Not when the people leave, when the life stops. And those are not the same thing. This is the mistake nearly everyone in your position makes. The people left, and you concluded that the life must be over, and so you stopped moving life through the house. You stopped cooking real meals. Because what's the point for one? You stop putting music on. You stop lighting the fire or the candles. You stopped inviting anyone in because the house is too quiet, too sad, too much of a museum. And so it becomes quieter and sadder and more of a museum, and the circle tightens every year. Hear me. The house did not go quiet because the people left. Houses survive people leaving. The house went quiet because the keeper of the house stopped keeping it. And that means the keeper can start again. Tonight. So here is the native way to bring a dwelling back to life. And I am going to give it to you in practices, the way it was given to me. The first practice is fire and food. Tonight or tomorrow, I want you to cook a real meal, not for one. That is the trap. I want you to cook the way you used to cook, the real recipe, the one that fills the house with smell, because smell is how a house remembers it is alive. And I want you to set the table, a real setting. And here is the part where you will resist. I want you to sit down at that table and eat that meal as a ceremony, with the television off. And if the tears come, and for some of you they will come, let them. That is not the sadness winning. That is a frozen river starting to move again. You have been eating standing up, over the sink, like a stranger in your own kitchen, like someone who has decided they are not worth cooking for. That decision, repeated every day, is teaching the house that its work is done, and it is teaching you the same thing. One real meal at a real table reverses the teaching. Food made with care, in the old way, is not nutrition. It is an announcement. It announces to the house and to the spirit that lives in you, someone still lives here. Someone worth feeding. And about those heavy hours, the appointments with the past. Here is what the woman with the 10 minutes to 6 wound eventually did, and it is the wisest handling of grief I have personally witnessed. She did not fight the hour. She did not distract herself through it or numb it with the television. She gave the hour a new job that honored the old one. At 10 minutes to 6 every evening, she made 2 cups of tea. 2. She carried them to the porch, and she sat, and she drank hers slowly, and she talked to him. Out loud, quietly, about the day. The neighbors probably thought what neighbors think. She did not care. And she told me that within a season, the cruelest 10 minutes of her day had become the richest. The hour still belonged to him. It always would. But it stopped being an ambush and became a visit. That is what I mean when I say the hour itself is innocent and can learn to hold something new. You cannot evict the past from those hours, and you should not try. The past has earned its place in your house. But you can change the terms. The hour the children used to come home can become the hour you walk every day at that exact time, so the body has somewhere to go when it turns toward the door. The Sunday hour the phone used to ring can become the hour you make your own call to someone who is sitting in their own quiet house, keeping their own sad appointment. The heavy hours are not your enemy. They are the strongest habits you own, decades deep, and habits that deep do not die. They retrain. Give every heavy hour one small new duty, and within a season, the schedule of emptiness becomes a schedule of ceremonies. Same clock, same house, different life. The second practice is sound, not television. Television is other people's noise, and it fills the ears while emptying the spirit. And you know that, because you have kept it running for years, and you are still heavy. I mean your sound. Music you actually love, played out loud, in the rooms, while you do things. The old songs. Sing with them badly. There is no one to perform for. That is the one gift of the empty house. And I mean your own voice. My grandmother talked to her house. I watched her do it my whole childhood. She said good morning to it. She spoke to her plants, to her fire, to her pots, to the photographs of her people. And I thought, as a boy, that it was a charming habit. I understand now that it was a technology. She was moving voice through the dwelling. She was refusing to let the air go dead. And I will tell you something a doctor told me years later, that people who live alone and speak out loud, to the plants, to the dog, to the house itself, stay sharper and lighter than those who go silent. The old woman knew what the studies would find. A house where a voice still sounds is a house that is still breathing. Speak in your house. It is not craziness. It is keeping. And while we are speaking of sound, I want to defend one more old practice the modern world laughs at. Get something alive in that house. A dog if you can walk one, a cat if you cannot, a bird, even plants if animals are too much, because plants are quieter but they are still company, still something that needs you at a fixed hour, still a reason the house is not only yours. People say a pet is not a substitute for people, and they are right, it is not. It is its own medicine, a creature whose whole world lights up when you walk into the kitchen, a heartbeat in the house that is not yours, a reason to speak out loud that no one can call strange. I have known widows whose doctors could measure the difference a dog made. Measure it. In blood pressure, in sleep. The old people never needed the measurements. No dwelling in the old way was ever only human. There were always animals at the edge of the fire. The modern empty house is not just missing people. It is missing every form of life but one. And one form of life alone, in a sealed, quiet box, is not how human beings were ever meant to keep a dwelling. Add a heartbeat. Any heartbeat. The house will breathe easier the same week. The third practice is the hardest and the most important. The house must receive people again. And I can feel you pulling back from the screen as I say it because the resistance is enormous. The house is too quiet, too dated. You have nothing to offer. It is too much trouble. Nobody wants to come. All of that is the museum talking, and the museum lies. Hear the old truth. In my people's way, the honor of a dwelling was measured by one thing only, not its size, not its furnishings, by how many people were fed in it. A small house that fed many was a great house, and the feeding does not need to be grand. One person, one pot of coffee, one piece of cake bought from the store, it does not matter. One neighbor, one widow from down the street, one grandchild alone without the crowd. One person, invited in, fed something, spoken with, at that same table. Do you know what happens in that moment? The house remembers its purpose, and so do you. I watched a man test this who had every excuse not to. Widower, 76, house quiet for 9 years. 9 years of eating over the sink. And what moved him was not wisdom, it was an accident. A young family moved in next door, and one afternoon the husband knocked, embarrassed, asking to borrow a ladder. And the old man, for reasons he could not explain to me later, heard himself say, "It's in the garage." And then, "I just made coffee, do you want a cup?" The young man hesitated, and then said yes. And they sat at the kitchen table, the table that had not held a guest in 9 years, for 45 minutes, talking about nothing. Gutters, the neighborhood, where to get a decent tire. Nothing. And when the young man left with the ladder, the old man stood in his kitchen and realized he was different, lighter, and the house was different. He said, and I will never forget this, it was like the house exhaled. 9 years of held breath, released by 1 cup of coffee. The visits became a habit. Then the wife came too. Then the children. who now treat that old man's porch as territory of their own. Last winter, when he had his health scare, it was the young neighbor who drove him, sat with him, brought him home. 9 years of silence, and the whole wall came down because one man said one sentence past his own resistance. "I just made coffee, do you want a cup?" That sentence is 8 words. Every one of you has 8 words in you. The distance between the museum and the living house is exactly 8 words long, because here is the secret under all of this, the one the empty house has been hiding from you. The house was never what made those years golden. You were. Your gathering, your feeding, your keeping. The house was just the place where you did your medicine. The children did not take the medicine with them when they left. The medicine is still in your hands. It was always in your hands. And any evening you choose, you can do what my grandmother did until her last season on this earth, in a house that had emptied of husband and children, and still felt, to every person who entered it, like the fullest dwelling in the territory. She kept the fire going. She kept the pot warm. She kept a chair ready. And the world, feeling that warmth from a distance the way cold hands feel a fire, kept finding its way to her door. It will find its way to yours. But the fire has to be lit first, and only the keeper can light it. Light it tonight. Cook the meal. Play the music. Speak in the rooms. Invite the neighbor. The house is not too quiet. The house is waiting. If what you heard today stayed with you, the book is there. The Native Way. 20 teachings, 100 pages, written the way I would speak to you if we were sitting together. Scan the QR code on the screen with your phone, or find the link in the comments. Read 1 chapter. Sit with it. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, how long has your house been quiet? And what is the first thing you are going to do to wake it up? I read every comment. And if this is the kind of conversation you have been looking for, subscribe to this channel. We are not collecting viewers here. We are collecting people who remember. Come back next week. I am not done teaching yet.